Hi guys, and welcome to this literature video. Today we're going to be learning about plot. We all should have an idea of what plot is from all the movies we watched, all the stories we've read or heard. Now, what is a plot? A plot is the order of events in a story from start to finish. So this is everything that happens from the beginning of your favorite movie to the very end. Now, there are certain elements that we're all going to learn about plot today. Now, these three elements are elements that you probably are very familiar with. Every good story has a beginning, a middle, and an ending. Usually in the beginning of a story, we'll learn about the characters. We'll learn about, usually it's the main characters. We'll learn about who they are, what their goals are, where they're from. We'll learn about the setting that these characters are in, what time is it, what year is it, where are we in the story, where the stories take place. Um, and then, or like the weather, or usually that's, the setting. We'll also learn about the conflict. We'll start learning about this. So, what's the big problem in the story? What really gives this story something interesting? In the middle of the story, that's usually called the climax. That's the big change that happens in the story. That's usually the big decision making moment. It's where the story really takes a turn, maybe for the expected, maybe for the unexpected. This can also be, in your favorite superhero movie. This can be like that big fight that happens. So, um, usually something will lead up to this fight. This fight will happen, and then it'll really calm down. Usually, after it calms down, that's going to be your ending. Some movies have good endings, some movies have bad endings, but it can be good or bad. So, this ending is usually really shows how the characters change. Now, the characters change all throughout the story, but this is really, really shown. There's a big difference from how the characters are in the beginning to how the characters are in the end. This is also the resolution. So, how this problem that we was introduced, or this conflict that was introduced in the beginning, is solved by the end. All right. So, one of my favorite movies is The Lion King. It's also a plot that a lot of people know, so it's easy to break down. So in the beginning of Lion King, we'll meet our main characters. We'll meet Simba, we'll meet Mufasa, Nala. We'll meet all of those characters that really play the biggest roles in the story. We learn the roles of the characters. We learn that Simba is Mufasa's son. Mufasa is the king of Pride Rock. The setting is Pride Rock. We learn Scar. We learn, all these characters that apply in the beginning. Now, the climax, usually the problem happened. We learned about the conflict between the beginning and the climax. We learned about it a little bit in the beginning, not really though. That happened more in a story thing that we'll learn about here in a second. But the climax is when Simba learns that Scar has taken over Pride Rock and returns to fight for his land. That's going to be that scene where he's running back to Pride Rock to where he goes and fights Scar. So that's when things start to take a turn. He leaves his comfortable zone, his comfortable little happy Hakuna Matata zone, and goes back to fight Scar. Now, in the end, this is where Simba becomes king and peace is restored. It's a very happy ending, as expected for, a good Disney movie. Okay, so we've learned about the beginning, the climax, and the ending. Three items that people are very familiar with. Now, we'll also learn about rising action and falling action. Like a mountain, in the beginning, we meet everything. The rising action will lead to the climax, and the falling action will lead to the ending. All right, so the rising action happens after the beginning, before the climax. So usually this asks the questions, what event starts the problem? So this is where we really figure out the problem, we really figure out the conflict, excuse me, what this story is about. We'll also find other characters that get introduced in the story. We'll learn more about, different characters, maybe like different what um how they apply to the story. We'll also learn about other problems that happen when the main conflict is being solved. Sometimes a character will be, going to that big problem. They'll be building up. Maybe they'll be on an adventure. Um, but they'll run into little bumps in the road. Now, these little bumps or these little problems might not be that big problem, that's happening. Maybe if someone lost something and they're going to find someone um, on an adventure to find someone, but they're running into small, bumps in the road that's slowing them down. Those are little problems, but those are not that big, where is this person at question in a story. But that's just an example of a rising action. Now, the falling action usually happens after the climax and it leads to the end of the story. So, this is where things really wind down after that big fight that just happened. Um, so, this is what happens after the climax, how the characters are affected from the climax. So, this big fight happened. What happens, to the characters' attitudes right after that climax? Um, so, what problems are solved? We'll find these problems out in the rising action. Um, Typically, these problems will be, addressed in the climax, and then they're solved through the falling action or the resolution or the ending. Now, in The Lion King, in the beginning, we'll meet Simba. We'll learn his role as Mufasa's son. And then this is where the rising action takes place. We learn that Scar kills Mufasa. This is when Simba runs away and blames himself, but finds new friends. And this is where we meet this is the new character aspect we'll talk about. We've been talking about. He meets the character Simba Simba meets the characters Pumbaa and Timon, so his new friends, and then this is also, they have their little adventure. That's going to be that whole rising action. Nala finds Simba. That's going to be that last part of the rising action because that's when Nala tells Simba that Pride Rock has been taken over, and then that's when Simba makes that big decision in the climax. He makes that big decision where everything turns around. He decides to go back and fight Scar for his land. Now we've passed that climax. That's when the falling action's gonna take into play. That's gonna it's gonna take into play. So the falling action is when Simba fights Scar. So that big fight happened. And then Scar is killed by the hyenas. That's how, the fight went down. So then everything starts raining, things start quieting down. Simba starts taking over Pride Rock. He walks up to the top, roars. So that's how that big fight ended up turning out. And then we get to that end where Simba becomes king, peace is restored, and everything is happy. So that's going to be the main parts of the plot structure of this plot line that we learned. Let me pull this up one real quick. So that's going to be the main parts of the plot line that we need to know if we're going to write stories anytime in the future or when we read. We should just keep this in mind and point out so that we know how to write a good story. Thank you.